Okay, good morning, good evening, everyone who's watching on the stream. We're live on Ham Radio DX, no matter where you are, and welcome to tonight's stream. We have a really special Shack tour tonight. This is number 5 in the series of Shack tours. I've received a lot of positive comments about this series, and especially in lockdown, it gives everyone a chance to catch up and see how everyone is doing and to tell their stories of how they got into amateur radio. Now, before I begin, those on the live stream, feel free to leave comments tonight and questions in the chat. If you're watching later, please also feel free to leave a comment below in the video. Please also subscribe to this channel. There's plenty of other videos that I've got in the pipeline, so please subscribe so that you don't miss out on those. Right, now that that's out of the way, we've got number 5 in our Shack tour, and I'd like to introduce a very special guest to the show and the first American in the Shack tour series, Katie Allen, WY7YL. Welcome, Katie.
Well, thank you, Hayden. It's a great pleasure to be here on your show. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for accepting the offer to join in this evening. It's great. I'm sure, no doubt that you're very busy, so thank you for taking the time to do this.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's Friday night now, and especially with the virus and nothing being open, it's pretty easy to stay home and hang out in the shack tonight. So we're getting ready for a QSO party this weekend. So perfect time to spend a little extra time, except I did throw an extra little bit of lipstick on for you tonight.
Well, I appreciate that, and yeah, no, it's really good to be able to have our first American on the show as well. So that's great.
Well, I'm honored. Thank you so much. This is really cool.
So we've got, I think we've got about 40 or 50 on tonight. We've got a couple of
Great.
comments on here. DE Brown, hi Katie, Phoenix checking in. DE AG7KU, N8NSK, and G7HFS. Ian, I suppose a special shout out to Ian. It's 2 a.m. in the morning there, so quite dedicated viewer. So Katie, introduce yourself. What have been your call signs, and whereabouts do you live in the United States?
Sure. Well, I am Katie Allen, and my call sign now is Whiskey Yankee 7 Yankee Lima, because I am the Wyoming YL. But I got my start actually in 2006, and my very first call sign, which lasted for maybe 10 days until I got a change from the FCC, was KB1NJU, which I immediately changed to W1KRB. That was in Connecticut. And then when I upgraded my license and moved out here, I changed it to WY7KRA. And then when I finally got my extra, I got my 2x2 and ended up here at WY7YL. I live in the northeastern part of Wyoming, out here in the Great Wild West, and which is in Crook County. So if you're a county hunter, we're in Crook County, and it's Delta November 74 in case you're a grid chaser. So we are, if you know where Wyoming is, there's not a lot of people out here. We have more antelope than people. There's only about 500,000 people in the entire state. But there's actually been a lot of new hams. We've seen quite a bit of growth here out in our area, which is really a lot of fun. And so I live here, obviously, and I am in my home with my husband, Dwyane, WY7FD. Because he loves field day. And my mom is our neighbor. She moved out here about 7 years ago, and she ended up getting her license, and she is WY7MOM. So everybody knows her as Mom. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, you've certainly got ham radio running in the family. How long has your husband been licensed and your mum?
Let's see. Dwyane's been like 30 years. Okay, he just said 30 years. Okay. I'm like, it's 20. I don't know.
That was a quick test.
I'm like, I don't know, longer than we've been married, but and my mom's been a ham for 5-6 years, something like that. So we've actually just recently kind of put a new 2-meter antenna up at her house. She's got a little Kenwood over there. It's a TM281, and we got her a diamond antenna that is a lot bigger than the one that she had previously, so it has much better reach and can get to our repeater on the top of the mountain. So now she checks in at the Tuesday night net with a local club, and then comes over here for different activities. A lot of times it's mostly like in the support arena, but we get her on some of the nets and out at events. And of course, a lot of people out in this area know her, and just by default, being my mom, she's become everybody else's mom too.
Well, that's fantastic. You did mention about growth in the local area. What's growth like in the United States? Because I believe that there's a lot of YouTubers that are doing, especially that have started with, I think of Josh with
Right.
ham radio crash course, starting a lot of people getting interested in ham radio. Is that something that's happening in the US at the moment, where it's starting to increase? There's more people getting licensed.
It seems to be, there's certainly been a steady increase over the past few years. I think right now we're a little over 700,000 hams in the country. But certainly most recently, we're seeing a lot of interest since there's been the lockdown because of the virus here in the US. Through where I work with Ham Radio Outlet, we're just seeing tons and tons of people buying radios, whether it's HF or 2-meter radios. They're buying, antennas to build more, or coax to build more antennas and do different projects. But we have a local ham that we do our field day with, and which is always the last weekend of June. And he and his wife just stopped up to visit us last weekend to talk about field day. And he's got some folks down near where he lives, it's about 45 miles away, that are just chomping at the bit to take their test. And I know that there's just people like that all around. We keep hearing about it, that there's more people that want to get licensed and get active. And, a big challenge, I think, and this is probably everywhere, is once people get their license, is actually getting them on the air and beginning to experiment with all the different facets of ham radio.
Yeah, 700,000 hams. That's it's quite good. Like here in Australia, we've got, I think it's about 14,000. But
Wow.
of those 14,000, I don't think a lot of them are active. So
Right.
it's very difficult to obviously gauge how active the bands
Right.
are. But one thing that's particularly on this channel, and one thing that I'd like to try and increase, is the interest in ham radio. So I see the growth in the United States and think that would be something that we could, eventually aspire to, and
Oh, absolutely.
and start to increase the numbers a little bit, particularly around younger people, and also females in the hobby as well. That would be a fantastic thing to do. So I think I've got a question for you a bit later on about that anyway. But
right. Well, and of course, as I get older, even though I know I look 21, I think of guys your age as the young hams now. So
we'll just have a look. Some of the comments. Who have we got? We've got Ian Harling says, Katie, you mentioned a QSO party this week, and what bands frequencies will you be using? It'd be amazing if we can catch up on the air.
Oh, well, we'll be on whatever's open, primarily during the day, most likely 20 and 15, I would guess.
Yeah, 15, 20, 40 at night.
40 at night. Yep. So that's generally, and we'll be operating as WY7QP. So Whiskey Yankee 7 Queen Papa will be the call sign we're using here in our shack.
There you go. See if you can work, Katie, and
Yep.
It'd be good to get a contact there. So next question I've got for you: what sparked your interest, and how did you get involved in ham radio?
Yeah, this is kind of a fun story I like to tell. I fell into ham radio, honestly. I'm not your average ham in terms of how I grew up. And the reason I say that is I became a ham when I got a job. I became a ham when I started working at the YLRL as the membership manager. One of the job requirements was to get your license. Well, that's fine and dandy. And I thought, well, as I begin to, go out to events and I'm meeting with these people, I really need to understand it and get my feet wet. So it just so happened not too long after I got my license, the ARL field day was happening. And because I was a brand new ham, I had the opportunity to operate as the GOTA station, which is for a new ham or someone who's been inactive, and it stands for Get on the Air. And Dan Henderson, N1ND, was my go-to coach. And I sat there and started making contacts for the very first time, operating as W1AW, which is just, who does that?
Yep.
And I thought that was a lot of fun. And the following month, went back to W1AW with Dan, and we operated in the HF contest, and it was an international contest. And I was just totally smitten and bitten by the ham radio bug. I just thought it was so amazing to sit here at my radio, talking in the microphone and realizing there was somebody else on another part of the world who was doing the exact same thing I was doing, probably sitting in their pajamas as well at 5 a.m. All these voices were coming at me, and it was like 5 a.m, and I'm trying to discern all of these British accents and who is, what's going on here. And I just started, once I got the groove of it, it was just this like adrenaline rush. And from there I was like, okay, I kept going with it. And there was about a half a dozen of us that worked at headquarters that all wanted to upgrade our license. So we participated in a class over about 6 months. And this was just before the US, the FCC regulations changed. It used to be you had to pass a Morse code test to get your license. And we were actually going to try to get me in there just before that rule changed, and I just couldn't get it. I had, I was busy with work and just trying to learn it. And I said, I can't do it. Let me just wait till the FCC rules change. And so I did. And right after that changed, I got a call one day up in my office from, Harold Kramer, WJ1B, who is the COO of YLRL at the time. And he says, can you come to my office? And I think, oh boy. So I went downstairs thinking, oh my gosh, what happened? And he was sitting in his office along with the Chief Development Officer, K1MMH, and Dan, N1ND. And they said, sit down, you're taking your test. And I said, what? And they handed me a general class test. And so I said, I'm not ready. They're like, you're ready. I'm like, no, I'm not ready. They're like, yeah, you're ready. Sit down and take this test. So I did. I sat down, and they sat there and chatted away the whole time. And I'm just taking the test, and I felt pretty good. I'm like, all right. I know I got 3. There was 3 questions I had absolutely no clue about. I didn't remember ever reading anything about it. And there was 3 that I was kind of like, it could be one way or the other. So I handed my test in, and Dan graded it, and he hands me another test. He goes, here. And I'm like, He's like, what? I'm like, I know I passed that test. And he's like, I'm telling you, you didn't. I'm like, I'm telling you, I did. Look again. Well, sure enough, he had the chart incorrectly placed on the test, and I did pass. But it was such a fun thing to remember. And from there, not too long after that, Sean KX9X came to work at the ARL as the new contest branch manager. And we both lived nearby. We were both only a few miles away from headquarters, but we were both living in apartments and really didn't have a very good place to set up ham radios. And so we renovated W1HQ, which is the headquarters station for the staff in the office building. And Sean really became one of my main Elmers. He taught me a lot about operating, about contesting. We used to just hang out on the weekends and play radio. And it was just, to me, I built a solid friendship with Sean. Sean's now, one of my very best friends, and this relationship that was just forged through ham radio. And it wasn't until I moved out here that I got my extra class. And that was because my husband used to sit down here in the shack and work some really good DX. And then he'd yell upstairs to me, he'd say, I just work so-and-so. Why don't you come? Oh, no, you can't get them. They're out of your band.
Make you feel jealous that you didn't be able to work the DX.
Exactly.
Yep.
So after hearing that a few times and missing out on some DX, I'm like, all right, that's it. And a friend of ours taught a class, and a bunch of us took the class. And I found that really actually a friend and my husband. Sorry, honey. And he's like, what? But I found for me, like, I was trying to study on my own, and I just didn't do very good with that. But being in a class setting with other people, that was how I learned much better. And so I finally got my, my extra class, and just been chasing DX ever since then. But it's really, there's so many different aspects to ham radio, but I would say probably the one thing that's kept me going all of these years now is the relationships you build with people. I met my husband who was a ham. I met him at Hamvention of all places.
That sounds romantic.
Yeah, among 20,000 hams, I run into this guy. and, and some of my very best friends are all hams. And I've met some amazing people that I would have never met otherwise if it wasn't for ham radio. One of the things I always say about ham radio is you can walk into a convention, ham fest, what have you, and you see people with their name and call sign badge. You don't see that they're a lawyer, a garbage worker, a doctor, a dentist, astrophysicist. They're their call sign. And you immediately have this rapport and something to talk about, and relationships grow and develop from there. And to me, it's like the great leveler, and it's a wonderful hobby to bring people together. And I think that's probably one of the things that, there's always different things you can do with it, but because of relationships that have built and grown over time, that's one of the things that's really kept me going with ham radio. It's always fun to get on the air and, talk to a friend or hear a friend's call sign out there in the middle of a pileup.
I think we were speaking just before the start of the interview, and in another video that I did with Jet from Last Man Standing, he mentioned
Right.
that he likes to say it was the original social media.
Right.
So,
I've seen that a lot.
yeah. So I take your point about what you say about that. It really is. It's really cool to be able to form these friendships with people that have a similar interest in you. And you spoke about CW. That seems to be taking it seems to be taking off again. Everyone seems to be.
Mhm.
It's not a requirement anymore, but everyone wants to learn it.
No, and I think one thing I've heard, when that requirement went away, the interest in CW actually grew. And it was because people wanted to do it. It wasn't a requirement.
Wasn't a chore.
It wasn't homework,
Yeah.
People were doing it because they wanted to. And I'm definitely not very good at it yet. I know my call sign. I know what my call sign sounds like, which is obviously very important. But I do rely on my husband's ears and software sometimes and what have you. But it's definitely, especially when the the solar cycle has been down like it has, and it's been so difficult to make contacts. But CW gets through so many times, and especially if you're going after, say, a de-expedition, you'll always have a better shot of getting an operator on CW than voice, for sure.
Couple of shout outs that we've got.
Yeah.
Couple
Peekaboo the Shack Cat has arrived behind me.
Just noticed him in the background. A couple of shout outs. We've got KN6BZG, Randy, Riverside, California. Ed, W8EO on as well. So thank you everyone for joining in.
Hi, everybody.
You mentioned about your a couple of your Elmers and mentors. So you mentioned Dan, N1ND, and Sean. Was there any others that you could think could come to mind?
Those two were my main Elmers, I would say. They helped me build my first antenna. We built, a multi-band dipole, and they came to my house. I was living with my mom at the time, and they came to the house, and I fed them, and they helped me up on the roof to get it hooked up. So that was the trade-off. Although I think whatever I made them, I burnt some of it, if I remember correctly. It's funny, you start talking about things and your memory comes back. I'm like, what the heck? I burned something, but the rest of the meal was edible. But we ended up, they helped me build my first antenna.
As long as they didn't make your dipole too short or too long or something like that as payback for it.
Right. Well, we did discover that some of my soldering had failed. So Sean and I climbed up on the roof a different day, and it was a little bit windy, and it was just cool enough that like trying a lighter or something just wasn't doing the trick. So we literally had like one of those little blow torches. And so I'm standing on the roof holding this big piece of cardboard, trying to block the wind. And Sean's balancing the antenna with his blowtorch, trying to fix it. It was quite, definitely the days before people would have been grabbing all that on video. But I'm sure if any of the neighbors drove up the street, they were wondering what we were doing up there. But whatever we did, it did work. And I was able to sit down in my little shack down in my mom's basement and make contacts, which is all that counted.
We got KG5 UBB, howdy from Texas. So
Well,
thank
howdy.
you for joining. So okay, that's great. Your Elmers and mentors. I want to ask you about some of your passions in amateur radio and what specifically you enjoy about that facet of the hobby. So I've sort of realized you've got a bit of a passion for contesting, and you've also got some achievements, working for the ARRL comes to mind. So that seems to be good. So what are some of your other passions in amateur radio that you've got that we might not know about or that everyone does know about?
Well, I think probably most people do know quite a bit about it, but yeah, definitely the contesting side of things. And it's funny, I never really thought of myself as a competitive person by any means, but there's something about getting on the radio and, running a pile up. I really like to get on and get the frequency and just start running and, just boom, 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 boom. And it really is, it is a little bit of an adrenaline rush. And then I know when I start flubbing my own call sign, when I'm going through a contest after a while, I'm like, okay, it's time for a break. 'Cause I can't even spit out my own call sign, but after a while, and then I also, another part of, the contesting, I really enjoy RIDI contesting, probably because I can talk to people in the shack and eat and drink without worrying about spitting on the microphone while I'm trying to make a contact, but it's a lot of fun. You might be able to tell from behind me on the wall, we have quite a few awards on the wall. We do team up. We have our club call sign is Whiskey Yankee 7 Sierra Sierra. And the fun story behind that call sign is that Dwyane and I were married on November 15th, which just happened to have been November sweepstakes weekend. And so after we celebrated with my family and his family for a little bit, we drove down to W1AW and played radio for a bit and hung out with Ward Silver and Zero AX and Mary and Sean again. And we had fun for a couple hours and then we were off on our way. But so when we settled in here in Wyoming and decided to create a contesting club, we decided to choose WY7SS for sweepstakes as the call sign, kind of in honor of our wedding day and our time at W1AW. And so that's just kind of a little fun on the side story. But and I think probably my other passion related to ham radio is doing what I'm doing with you now, is just being able to talk about ham radio in terms of it being the personal things that you can do with it in terms of reaching out to other people, making friendships, building relationships, sharing the joy of what a great hobby it is, that you can sit in a little room in the middle of nowhere and reach out. It's like fishing. You could just throw your call sign out there and end up talking to somebody in Kazakhstan or some country you've never heard of. I mean, it's a great geography lesson for kids and adults alike when you're on the radio. You never quite know who you're going to talk to. And for me, that's fun. It's like you're suddenly making new friends. And through social media, I made friends with a ham over in Scotland. And we went on vacation there a couple of years ago and ended up getting an invitation to come visit their club while we were over there. So we actually were able to build our vacation around going to visit Stirling, Scotland, and hung out. Dwyane sat down at the radio and probably made about 100 some odd. He made 100 some odd QSOs. We were hanging out, visiting with everyone, and I did a little live stream while I was there. And it's just like, where else would you do? What other hobbies bring these kind of opportunities to you, where you have virtual strangers or someone will drive up the street and see your tower and knock on the door. You're like, hey, come on in my shack. Let's have a cup of coffee and talk ham radio.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's, to me, I guess, is probably, while it's not, making 25 QSOs on 6 meters in the middle of summer type of a thing. For me, it's really the people side of things, I guess, I love being on the radio, but being able to talk to people about ham radio, I find a lot of fun too, and trying to share how fun it is. And it's, it doesn't matter your age or skill set. It's just, get on the air and have some fun. Cool.
Well,
Hey, I see my friend Ed is on here, and then 6AA. Hi, Ed.
That's good. Give a shout out to Ed, and also we've got KM6KJA from is it Irving or Irvine?
Irvine, I believe. Is
Irvine,
the
California.
Irvine, yeah.
Yeah, my pronunciation of things would be a lot different with
Right.
the Australian accent, of course. And when you
Oh, you have an accent?
and when you I'm glad that you can you were talking earlier about British accents and being able to understand them. I'm sure that
Right.
Australian accents are much more difficult. Well, when you come to visit Australia, you can join our local radio club and operate from there.
Brilliant.
So there's open invitation.
Perfect.
I think
That
I'm
sounds
vice
good to me.
president of the club. I'm sure
Yeah.
I can do that.
I bet you can make it happen.
I can make it happen.
All right.
So, well, that actually moves into one of my next questions. So you mentioned that you started a radio club. Do you want to speak a little bit more about that? And are you involved in any other radio clubs? So I do know that you're a member of YLRL.
Mhm.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about that as well, your involvement, and what do you say to other YLs who want to join
Oh,
such a
sure.
club?
Well, we have our contesting club here is pretty small. It's, primarily Dwyane and myself, and then other hams that may come to visit. So usually it's some visiting hams. We both belong to the Grand Mesa Contesters Club, which is primarily out of Colorado, but there's hams also from Wyoming that belong to that. And we also belong to the Rocky Mountain Ham Radio, which was actually a few years ago the Club of the Year winner at the Dayton Hamvention. And it's a service-oriented club, so there's no dues. Just you need to put your blood, sweat, and tears into it to earn your to earn your shirt, so to speak. And I joined. I actually just recently got my 5-year member certificate from the YLRL, and for a long time I hadn't joined because I just didn't really. Honestly, I was like, oh, what do I need to do that for? And then I think it was I want to say I was at Hamvention probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And I had an opportunity to actually talk to some of the members at YLRL and started to see what they were doing. And I said, you know what, I need to get involved with this, and joined. And I've met a whole host of other YLs from around the world. We have a net that meets on Thursday nights on Echolink. So no matter where you are in the world, and actually it's hosted by Clara, which is the Australian Ladies Amateur Radio Association.
Yep.
And so I think I'm not sharing the name of it quite correctly, but
Alara?
Alara? No,
Alara.
I thought it was Clara. CLA? I don't know. Anyway. And then we have, there's a YL group on Facebook where we all work together and chat. We talk about ham radio stuff as well as other things. But it's a great opportunity as the organization. I don't hold any kind of role in it other than being a member. So I just feel like anything we can do to promote women in ham radio is always a good thing. And I always tell somebody when they're first checking it out or starting to play on the radio, I said, you always have an advantage on the radio. So no matter how much power you're running, you're always good for an extra 10 dB, no matter what. And I said, and guys always want to talk to the YLs on the radio. So it's a win-win. It's a lot of fun to be a woman on ham radio. And a lot of folks, as I've met along the way, the ladies that I've met and become friends with, there's quite a few here in the States that actually have call signs that end with YL also. And they're doing things just the same as the guys are. They're building antennas. They're putting their shacks together. They go out and do roving for, grid squares and VHF contests and parks on the air and club activities. And it's a great opportunity to try a variety of different things. And last night I was on a phone call similar to this with the with a group down in Texas, and I had kind of a similar question of how do you encourage women to get involved? So we know a lot of times wives will get their license for their husband, but they may not necessarily do anything with it. And usually what I like to suggest is, you need to find something that maybe you two can do together. remember what it was that you're excited about and share that and why it would be good to do it together. Like, for example, Dwyane and I like to contest together. And sometimes I don't necessarily want to get on the air, believe it or not. And so, but I like to sit and listen and help pull the call signs out of the muck. And I will sit and log, and then he can, do all of the talking. And so it's a great, sometimes, doing things like that where you partner up for an activity. It doesn't have to be that she's, becomes a contester or, a DX chaser or what have you, that there's so many different aspects and opportunities to find things that you can do together that, the world is your oyster, as you can say, essentially, that just try to find something that you like to do and share that passion, and then share why you think it would be fun to try it together. And, and then be supportive of her other hobbies. Certainly there's things that you do alone that you can't do with other people. Like, Dwyane doesn't come in my craft room with me and paint. So, and he gets up in the middle of the night and does meteor scatter work. He's on, MSK 144. I am not dragging myself out of bed at 2 a.m. to do that. Like, I don't even wake up when he does it. So, you got to just realize that sometimes you can't always do everything together, but you got to just kind of play around with all the different things you could do and figure out what you want to do together.
Well, I think, and you mentioned about when finding something that's a common interest. So in that case, I can think of a good example of, as you say, parks on the air or soda activations. Right. A lot of couples like hiking. So they can combine that with the radio, and it is a very good idea, and something that I think it needs to be encouraged more females to take up the hobby. I was looking before this stream, and my statistics since I started this channel, it actually surprised me that it was higher than what I thought, but 8.6% of my viewers are female, which is a bit disappointing.
That's pretty good.
It would be good if it was a lot higher. I'd like it to be over 10%. But it's good that there are avenues and there are ins for females in the hobby and YLs. And as you say, it's kind of cool to have your own call sign that's got YL in the call sign as well. So
absolutely,
that'd be a whole lot of incentive and fun. So as far as radio clubs, actually, we'll talk about your involvement with W5KUB, Amateur Radio Roundtable, because that's where a lot of people would know you from.
Right. Let me grab a quick sip of water here.
That's fine.
Dwyane's over there drinking scotch and I'm having some water. So
I think you've got the wrong beverage.
I know. I saw him grab the Talisker bottle. I'm like, it smells good in here now.
Is Dwyane working the DX at the moment, or is he just in the shack?
He's about to.
He's
getting what are you working on over there? Well, I don't know. He's got something open, but the antennas aren't. We actually had thunder and lightning last night, so the antennas are unplugged. So W5KUB is Amateur Radio Roundtable with Tom Medlin. I met Tom a bunch of years ago at a Hamfest. He has been going to Hamvention for, I want to say, like 38 years, but he was the original person to start streaming from Hamvention. And over the years, it started to grow, and he would go to Huntsville Hamfest and do live stream from there as well. And started having the opportunity where companies were giving him products to give away as gifts. So he would be able to, people could watch it. So if you couldn't get to a Hamfest, a lot of people obviously can't travel to some of these bigger events, but they're able to watch it through the live stream and visit with people on getting interviewed and so on. And just about the time I was about to start my job with Ham Radio Outlet, and I said, hey, do you think I could announce my new job on your show? And he's like, sure. And so, I got on the show and we did that, and it was a lot of fun, and he invited me back. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll come back. And then, another week he's like, hey, why don't you come back again? That was a lot of fun. And then it just kind of kept going. And so it's been like almost 4 years now that I've been participating in the show. I'm not on every week. I'm on pretty frequently, but it's a lot of fun. He gives so much to ham radio and puts a lot of his own time and energy and money into bringing these ham fests to the hams around the world so they can watch. Brings, I think at the last ham fest he had, I don't know, there was over $10,000 worth of prizes that he was able to give away on the stream.
Wow.
And we do education. He's been doing, his latest interest has been the balloons with the little tiny APRS in there. I think he's on his like 8th balloon because they keep getting like blown over China and falling out of the sky or something. But I'm not sure what it is, but we have a variety of different people that come on the show. We had Martin Jew from MFJ was on this past week, Joe Eisenberg, K0NEB, who's the kit maker man. He comes on frequently, and Ashar Farhan came on the other day talking about the Ubix 40. So, I mean, just a variety of different topics. You just never know week to week what we're going to be talking about. And it's a lot of fun. And I enjoy getting to, I've gotten to know a lot of the people personally. When I get to go to a convention, people come up and, say that they're a regular viewer, and I'll recognize their call sign right away because they chat just like, here on YouTube. They can do that with the show as well. And it's a lot of fun. And I'm glad that I get to do it as often as I do.
Yeah, that's it's good that you're able to have a bit of that interaction with those that can't necessarily make those hamfests and those large gatherings as well. So it was good. I did tune in last week, and a good variety of different topics. So very good. I've lost my train of thought. That's why I keep talking.
Oh.
I'm trying to remember what it was. It was. I'm trying to remember what it was. Anyway, I'm sure it'll come to me eventually. But you did mention ham radio outlet. So what's it like working there? That'd be almost a dream for all of us.
It is. I tell you, I mean, talk about the coolest ham radio company in the world to work for, the Ham Radio Outlet. I just actually celebrated my 4th year with them, and I'm the social media manager, and manage all of the Facebook pages for all of our stores, Twitter, YouTube now. Got an Instagram page, which doesn't get as much traffic just because I think in general, a lot of hams aren't necessarily on Instagram a lot, but I do see quite a few. We've just started doing a lot more with YouTube and videos. So I'm suddenly learning how to make a lot of videos here in the Shack. And I have a show called the Shack Chat, which I do on Fridays now. And so it's a great opportunity. When I walk into a convention, say, and I'm wearing my Ham Radio Outlet shirt, it's just a certain level of pride to be working for HRO and representing them. Every time I get on a show like this, or I'm at a convention, or just interacting with people on social media, it's, it is like a dream. You walk into the store, you walk in one of the stores and you're like, it's hard to not walk home with everything.
Yeah.
It's like, you work in retail and you always end up buying stuff, but thank goodness for employee discounts,
Yeah, employee discount card would be very, very handy at that store, I reckon. I've just,
it is.
I'll put the link in the chat and also in the description to the Ham Radio Outlet YouTube channel. I can see there the Shack Chat that you
great.
had. Was it just today?
Yep.
So
I think I just figured it out.
I
do it at 11:30 in the morning, my time, which I think is 17:30 Zulu. I think, or UTC, sorry, the Zulu. I'm trying to figure that out because I apparently posted it as Eastern Standard Time, like 1:30 Eastern Standard, but it's not standard because it's daylight savings. And I wish our country would just get rid of the whole daylight savings things. It's such a nightmare to keep track of.
It's a constant debate here too. There's one state in Australia that refuses to adhere to daylight saving, whereas everyone else does, and there's always a bit of an argument about whether to keep it or not. So is that live, the Shack Chat?
It is. I do it at, like I said, 11:30 my time, and it streams to Facebook. And today was the first time I streamed also to YouTube. And so I got it placed up on YouTube, but see, I couldn't figure out where I didn't save properly because I'm using a new streaming platform. So I just uploaded it after the fact, but it was kind of fun. And I have a group on Facebook now on the Ham Radio Outlet Facebook page for the Shack Chat, so people can share their photos or videos of them being radioactive, and getting a nice little group going there. And it's a lot of fun. Like I said, you just suddenly, you make all these friends when you're interacting. And I'm seeing some call signs here, even in the chat tonight, that I recognize. And it's just, it's just really neat.
I have to do a special apology to Tim. He says, don't pick on VK4. That happens to be the state that I just said doesn't need the daylight saving. So that's okay. That's okay. I'm not sure whether it's a good idea or not anyway. So, well, actually, so our dedicated viewer, Ian, there in the UK, he said earlier that he asked about the ICOM 9700 behind me in my virtual background.
Right.
He said he's just bought an IC 7300, which I have, and mine's just arrived too. So
nice.
maybe I will treat myself to the 9700. So do you get to play with all of the new gadgets and toys as they start to arrive in Ham Radio Outlet? That would be pretty fun to do.
Oh, sure. Well, if I happen to go visit a store, absolutely. I work remotely, so I work here in my house, and or I can literally do my job on my phone when I'm out traveling.
So I suppose the lockdown period's been easy for you. You've been just business as usual, yeah?
Pretty much. And I live in Wyoming, so it's not like I'm in, a metropolis where I'm always getting Chinese food delivered to my house. We have like one restaurant downtown available for dinner. So it's, it hasn't been a big change for us here, at least. But I was talking with another colleague today about that, who also, he lives in Idaho, and said, it really hasn't been as big of an effect because of where we live. You don't see, we're not missing so much because we already kind of live a quiet life, if you will. And now I just lost part of my train of thought. You're rubbing off on me, Hayden.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing. Ham Radio Outlet, we were talking about that.
Oh, great. I'll lose my train of thought about that.
Shack Chat on Facebook.
So we have always looking for people to share pictures of what they're doing to enjoy ham radio, and call it, what you're doing when you're radioactive. And the thing is, you can be ham radioactive by doing things like teaching a class, or being a VE at a test session, or being a club member. There's a lot of people say, this is another example where your spouse could get involved. For example, for you guys that maybe have a wife that has their license but isn't very active, maybe get them involved in the club some ways, because a lot of times just being in that supportive role is something that they can do, and you can still do it together. I know, like, for example, my mom goes to field day, and her big role is helping organize and get us there. So, we end up, as you'll see, this shack is a total disaster, and she'll end up getting things organized. We have all these bins now for field day, because a few years ago she took everything, sorted it out, labeled all the bins, and put it all together. And then she bakes for us too. So, that's mom's role. And she does, might get on the air, but she doesn't even necessarily want to do that, but she likes doing that aspect of it. And so in that way, she's still participating. And so sometimes you can get people to get involved in, not necessarily the get on the air type of a thing, and sit in front of the microphone, which sometimes this is scary for people.
Yeah, exactly. What was it like the first time picking up a microphone and speaking to someone on the radio? I know the first time that I did it was absolutely terrifying, and I think everyone has the same experiences.
It is. And I was terrified too. And believe it or not, my first contact was while I was over at W1W. But then my real one under my own call sign, my first DX was over to Scotland. And but I had Sean practically holding my hand through the whole thing. But for years I still would get mic fright because I was afraid to do something wrong. And then now I've learned that even if I do something wrong, I just admit it, or I put it on Facebook immediately to let everybody know what a goofball I am. Because they're like, guess what I just did?
If you put it on Facebook, no one else can do it then.
I posted something. I actually even used it on my work on HRO's Twitter page that says it was something like it was for a Wednesday wisdom type thing. And we've discovered that your radio works a lot better when you actually plug the antenna in, as Katie discovered when I tried to make a contact. I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working when my husband gently reminded me that, have you checked to make sure everything's plugged in? Which of course it wasn't.
I did see that on the page there, so that was quite amusing. But we've all done it. We've all done it at some point.
Well, that's it. And that's what I think is, what people have to get over in that beginning phases when they're first getting on the air, is realizing that you're going to make mistakes. And, field day here in the States is a perfect opportunity to get your feet wet. And you always know who the newer operators are. You can almost hear the trepidation in their voices. And so people immediately slow down. And I've heard a lot of people that will kind of walk someone through the contact, and you can tell. So both sides of it, you can tell who's learning and who inadvertently becomes an Elmer to get them through that contact. And it's great to just kind of sit back and listen. You're like, this is what it's all about, is, helping someone through that. And you just, you hear people on both sides of the radio. If you could see them, you would know that they're both smiling ear to ear, because it worked out. And it's magical. It really is.
Yeah, I had a live stream last week with another shack tour with a local Australian amateur, and he mentioned a similar thing with if you're interested or worried about getting involved in the hobby and you're not quite sure where to start, just go down to your local radio club, go to a field day, just get involved with these things, because everyone started somewhere, so everyone's going to be know where you're at and how to help you to get your feet wet in the hobby and how to get involved.
Right. And that's, one thing I find, on different areas of the internet, of social media, what have you, that Reddit, I have discovered the subreddit for amateur radio is a great place. There's like 54,000 hams subscribed to that now. And people will ask questions, and they always feel like they have to preface it with well, I'm a newbie here, and ask the questions, which, if they asked it in other places, they probably would get skewered and get the old, well, you took your test, didn't you know the answer to that? But you don't see that over there. And that's one of the things I liked, is that people are still out there trying to help other people. And that's like, for example, with Josh's website and YouTube channel, Ham Radio Crash Course, it's all about helping people to feel more comfortable with all of the different aspects of ham radio, learning to become a ham, learning how to figure out what radios you get, or what kind of antenna to put up, or doing goofy things like turning your lawn chair into an antenna. I don't know. Did you ever see what he did with that?
I've seen that. That's a very good video. I like that video.
It was a great video.
And it was almost like he's sitting there and he's drilling into the lawn chair, and his son's standing there going, "What are you doing, Dad?" Start hanging the lawn chairs from the gutter.
Lawn chair antenna. I mean,
it worked, but it was a very smart thing to try. It was.
All right, I have an announcement here from the shack. WY7FD is on 40-meter FT8 beaming towards Europe.
FT8.
So FT8 on 40 meters. Look for WY7FD.
Oh, we'll see. Well, let's see. We've still got a couple more questions, so we'll see how many contacts he gets in the meantime. Right. And if you managed. Yeah, if you manage to work Dwyane in the background, just pop it in the chat. So and just pop in your call sign, and we'll let him know. But it's all about trying to encourage people and trying to get them more involved in the hobby. And as you say, there's so many different aspects of it. You don't, as you say, with your mum, you don't need to necessarily pick up a microphone. You can just be helping out. So it's good to see. And Josh, Ham Radio Crash Course has been like I looked at some of his statistics when we were on his live stream last week, and he's grown, like doubled the amount of subscribers and the amount of interest in his channel, and in the last, I think, 12 months. So
Right. Yeah. This
it's,
past year is just exploded.
yeah.
Crazy. Yeah.
And while
And
everyone's
I,
in lockdown now, everyone's studying
right.
and doing something that they said they probably always wanted to do.
Right. Well, I think for in his channel also is that um he makes things very understandable, and he is approachable, and makes it, he doesn't, it's not intimidating to see what he's doing and follow along. And he's like scary smart. But when you have a one-on-one with him or watch his videos, you don't feel like he's so far gone because he's so smart. He is able to bring it down and talk to you about things. And I guess apparently, his wife was like, it was because of that, being able to explain things in a very understandable way. His wife's like, you should make some videos for YouTube, and voila, there he is.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Not everyone knows everything either. So it's good to
Yeah.
have his range of shows have got all the different guests with all sorts of different interests, and
Right.
he can share the knowledge amongst that. I think I'm booked in to go on his show in a couple of weeks' time to talk about sporadic E, and how that works for because it's coming towards your summer over there. So
Right.
there's going to be a lot of people working sporadic E on 6 meters
Mhm.
and even 2 meters. So getting some
Right.
more people involved and on those bands. So yeah, so that should be an interesting thing. So
Absolutely.
but that was my next question. So how do you think we can
Oh.
encourage new hams to the hobby? We sort of covered a little bit of it, but
Mhm.
yeah, how can we encourage them?
Well, I think doing things like what you're doing here with shows of, all different types. I think when people can see a conversation like what we're having now, that, it's okay to just ask different questions and talk to people. I think one of the things I think is really important, and this goes back to kind of a local issue, is that if you're a member of a ham radio club and someone new walks through the door, don't ignore them. I think every club should have like a hospitality committee where there's someone whose job is always to be at the door to greet people and welcome anyone new, and then pair them up with someone, for example. So say your club has a host VE sessions. So when you have a VE session and all these people walk away with their ham ticket, what's next? Well, a lot of times people just kind of fall into wayside because they don't know what to do. And I am guilty of this myself, and it's something that we're working on here that we need to improve on too. So I am definitely not speaking from the rooftops here, because I need to walk the walk and talk the talk myself. But one of the things I think would be really kind of cool is that if you have a big enough club that you say you have your test session on, Friday, May 1st. Okay. So when the people walk away, they're walking away with maybe a flyer that invites them to a club meeting the next Friday. And there's going to be pizza and beer and cookies or what have you. So, I mean, you have to have food when you have a ham club meeting. I mean,
Yeah,
we all know that we love to eat,
of course.
feed us hams after all, but have a
Or a
plan.
barbecue.
Oh,
Barbecue's
absolutely.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any kind of food.
Yeah.
So have a plan, and a very close after that test session, have a gathering, have a hands-on gathering, and also have people that are going to make a phone call to those people as a follow-up and invite them, because, you know, people will take their flyer home and forget about it. For me, like, I come home and I put stuff on the shelf, and then I'm like, where? Then I find it 3 months later. So making these personal follow-ups, and then, really kind of working together as as a club member, and literally taking somebody under your hands, just like Sean did for me by becoming my Elmer and calling me up and say, hey, Katie, let's go over to 1HQ, and 20 meters is really good right now, and let's go get on the air. Something to that effect. So I think that's really important, that we need to, all of us need to do this, and myself included, is be more active. And once we see someone who's new, and bringing them in, invite them into your shack. We've done that. We had someone we've helped test and brought them into the shack and got them on the air and played around. And um, people need to experience it. It's one thing to go through all the tests and get your license, but if nothing else happens after that, it doesn't do anybody any good. And you got to give people all their excited. You get that license and you're like, oh, I got my license. But then that goes away if you can't do anything about it. So it comes down to the local level when you are somehow interacting with people, to be supportive and realize that just because you pass a test doesn't mean you know all of the electronics or all the rules, that you know enough to pass. But there's a difference between taking a test, and there's a difference between sitting down in front of a radio and pressing the foot pedal and actually talking to somebody. So there's, you can't learn that in a book. You need to have some help with that. And so finding some people in your club that, not everybody's good at that either. So you work with who's good to do different things, to get people to participate and do things together, and then they start to get their comfort level growing, and then eventually maybe they become an elder to somebody else who's new, and then it just kind of goes from there. So it's a step-by-step process, but like you said, we all started somewhere, but most of us didn't just suddenly arrive at becoming a ham. It took time to get to whatever stage you're at, and you got to remember that, and remember how nerve-wracking it is when you first get started. And honestly, sometimes I still get a little mic shy. I'm afraid to step on somebody else's frequency. If I'm contesting, I want to make sure I find something with lots of space and just sneak in there.
Well, it just brought back.
My husband's like, just get in there.
He brought back some memories of when I started, and it was things like, when I started measuring, what's the formula for measuring a dipole? What do I need to measure this side? How high do I need to put it? What's the go with the Yagi, and all these sort of questions that eventually you learn, and you're always constantly learning, of course. But yeah, we do need to think of the new hams, and you did mention about the new ones that are coming into clubs. And keeping their interest. We brought this up in our local club very recently, and the question that was raised is how can we keep that interest? And one of the things was that we as hams tend to stockpile a lot of maybe old radios that are still good, but they sit in the back of a shed and they don't do anything.
Right.
So even just getting those out and lending them to these new hams so that they get a feel, they get on the air, and then once they've got a bit of a feel and they've got their own radio for themselves, and then it sort of it just keeps the interest there, and makes use of old gear too that's otherwise sitting around collecting dust.
That's a great idea, and that's exactly right. We all have stuff sitting around. Hands-on one thing I've heard from a lot of different people that have participated in successful clubs are those that do hands-on activities, like building a J-pole or a tape measure Yagi or programming a radio. Somebody might have experience with DMR, so then they'll do a demonstration at a club meeting on how to program a DMR radio. I mean, there's so many different things they can do. And so rather than, just sitting in a business meeting or, what have you, having things to do, which forces you to interact with other people. And, I know, what was it? Oh, we built a CW kit when I worked at the YLRL. That was a lot of fun. It was that little MFJ 40 meter cub kit. And we worked on that over lunch for a couple of weeks. We did little bits every time, but that was fun. We all looked forward to going back and doing that. So if you have the opportunity to do stuff, do stuff. To me, that's a lot more fun than just sitting around listening to a lecture. Although sometimes lectures are really good because you learn some things. But I think a lot of club meetings, there's some clubs I know they'll have like a business meeting their first of the month, and then another time during the month they'll have an activity. It depends on the size of your club. Obviously, if you have 5 people, you're not necessarily going to do different activities throughout the month. But some of these other groups, I mean, it's amazing what they can pull off, and it's really just, I think the only limit is your creativity and ability to come up with different ideas. And there's no shortage of them out there. And, you start looking around what other clubs are doing and, borrow their ideas and grow from there. But, that's certainly, in the times that I've been out and about and meeting with different clubs and hams around the country over the years, those are some of the things that I've learned have been, helped make successful club meetings. And certainly when I've attended them, they're a lot more fun because, it's fun to do stuff, especially if there's cookies.
Yeah. Cookies or any type of
Cookies,
food, as we
yeah.
said before.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got some photos that we can share, so we
do.
can have a tour of your shack and a tour of some of the antennas, and
All
this
right, I'll
is going
give
to be
you the
quite good.
antenna. All right, well, we'll reserve your opinion on that one. Hold on one
I
second.
think
All
it
right.
is. They are good.
Okay, so let's see. I'm going to give you that one, and I can't see what I'm doing here. Let me make sure. Okay, are you seeing my house?
Yep.
Okay, I'm looking at all right, so this is our house, and I just took this picture because the grass is actually turning green, which is unusual this time of year. But just off to the left here, this is Tower 2. That's our 50-foot tower. And I'm going to give you, this is a little overview, and then I'll give you a couple other photos. This is part of the 100+ foot tower. Over here is our satellite, and then over here is our 6-meter antenna. And behind us now, believe it or not, see where the grass kind of is extra green? That's where our property line stops. All that stuff behind us is actually a ranch. So it's, we actually only have about a third of an acre or so. Whoa. Is everything okay on your side? Okay.
Yep. All fine.
Okay, so this is tower number 2, actually. And this is, I'm going to put my glasses on so I can read all my notes. I wanted to make sure I had everything here. But that's our, on top of that is our Cushcraft A4S. It's our tri-bander. And at about a 90-degree angle, 90 degrees, there's a homebrewed 12-meter 3-element beam up there, and that's powered by a Ham 4 rotator. And that was the first tower we put up when we moved here. We actually didn't even own the house yet. We were renting it. And we asked the landlord, do you mind if we put some concrete in the ground and put a tower up? We said, we'll put some grass over it in case we ever move. And after we spent about $1,000 on concrete, I said, my husband, I'm like, we're dying here. I'm not moving.
Very, very understanding landlord, that's for sure.
No kidding. Now this is tower number 1. This is our 110-foot tower that we put up a couple few years ago. This took a little bit of time to get this up. But I'll tell you, it kind of worked from the top down. On the very top at 110 feet, we've got a high gain 204 BA, which is a 4-element 20-meter. And then below it at 102 feet is our Cushcraft XM240, which is our 2-element 40-meter beam, which we put up about a year and a half ago over Labor Day weekend. We got Dwyane's son to help climb up there and put that up. And that was quite the job because that antenna is a beast, I tell you. It was just huge. And what a job that was to get that thing up there. But it's up. Oh, and yep, Joe is a Ham, KC0FWG, who lives in Fargo. So they're about 8 hours away, and now it's made us a grandparent. So that's, we have our radio in the car now. So when we make our 8-hour drives to go visit the grandbabies, we can still be on the air. And then at 100 feet, we have our radio waves, 160-meter double bazooka. And at 95 and then 90 feet, we've got an 80-meter and a 75-meter double bazooka, also radio waves. Down at 70 feet is a 40-meter dipole. 60 feet, we've got a 30-meter radio waves double bazooka. And then just below that, can't quite remember what footage it's at, there's an 17-meter dipole, right? Yeah. And then, so that's, and then also we've got a little IRLP node here so that we can connect down with our friends in the Rocky Mountain Ham Radio down in Colorado.
What's the IRLP number for those watching and want to join in?
It's a private one.
Oh, it's a private one. I don't think
gotcha.
It's not. Yeah, it's just for getting down to that group, which we almost never do, but we've got it in case we need to. So
Gotcha.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, that's fine.
So sorry. Okay, so now just kind of zooming in a little bit. This is our satellite antennas, and then there's the 6-meter beam over there. So this is actually up on, I think, I can't remember if I have another photo. I'll find out in a second, but that is this is our 6-meter beam. It's 7 elements, and it's up on a 30-foot tower that's on the other side of our garage. So that's up against the house with on that, and that is powered by a Yaesu G450 rotator. And then our satellite system over here is actually all homebrew. We've got a 2 meter and 440, and we've got I think it's the G450 rotator from Yaesu, so that it can do the as-L rotation. And yeah, so there's just another shot from the back. We've got to do some painting again this year. We got nailed with some wicked hail this past year. So pardon the paint job on the back of the house. We need to fix that.
So you enjoy working satellites as well?
We have not gotten there yet. We've got the station for it, but we're still trying to figure it out. Okay, now here's the horrible picture. This is our shack. And my husband's having a heart attack right now because I'm showing off. But I tell you what, I
don't see what's horrible about that. That's just.
I think every ham's going to be like, that's what my shack looks like. So
see, it's always, as long as there's mess, it means there's productivity. So.
Right. So over here is this is station 1. That's where Dwyane is sitting right now, and I'm sitting in the chair with the pillow so that I can be up high enough in here. So over there is the 7600. The Icon 76 Pro 3 is here at the table with me, and on the satellite station is the Icon 9100. There's Peekaboo, the shack cat, and she's sitting on the 7600. And as I mentioned to Ian or Hayden before the show started, she's can tend to be our cat attenuator, because when she sits her fat butt on the radio, I can't hear unless we plug in some headphones. So oh, and that's where she is right at this moment. Let's see. Oh yeah, there she is back there, right there. So, but she actually found her when she was about 4 weeks old. And I was working here in the shack because at the time I was doing tech support for Ham Radio Deluxe. So my office was here in the shack. And so she was basically raised here in the shack with me. So she's very happy and comfortable to be in the shack. And then let's see. Oh, so there's our stack for all of our rotators. I just thought people might be interested in that. So you can see basically everything's just boom, boom, boom. We have it all situated. But my husband is an electrical engineer he's a control systems engineer. So needless to say, our entire shack is built on a control system. And here is the PLC system that he's put together. And so you can see along every antenna there is labeled. You can see where we're running. And this just kind of looks into the system that he's got there. I don't understand half of it, but I know it works. And then on the wall, this is our grounding. So when we're not plugged in, and these are where I forgot to plug in sometimes. So radio 1 goes out. That's our 7600 that goes out. And then radio 2 or output 2, kind of to the different towers. And I never remember which one is which, but it always works out. Once I just plug everything in and then know I'm good. And then that's just our wall over there with a bunch of our sweepstakes plaques and RIDI WPX, the RIDI Roundup, sweepstakes, my DX contest, triple play awards, life membership plaques, all that good stuff. As like everybody likes to call it, the I love me wall. So so we have a lot of stuff we like to do and share that, but that's kind of a tour of what we've got here in Sundance, Wyoming, in the WY7YL / WY7FD shack.
I think that was a very, very good shack. It doesn't matter about mess. It's as long as there's something going on in the shack, that's the main thing. Do you have
There's always
with being a ham family, do you have a radio in the kitchen though? That's the big thing.
No, there's no radio in the kitchen, although there might be a handheld hanging around. Oh, and I forgot, kind of behind me is the workstation. So there's a desk back there, and that's where the soldering iron is. And Dwyane does all the programming for the control systems here. And so it's, we've kind of got all these sections, and the goal and the plan one of these days is to have everything running. Both of our radios are powered. We have amplifiers that go with them. So we have the Icon PW1 that goes with the 7600, and then there's a PW1 that goes with the 756 Pro 3, which is here on this side, which is actually outside of the room. We've got a shelving built out there, but we would put the PW1 out there. The idea is to actually get both amplifiers out of the room and organize a little bit more. However, we haven't quite gotten there yet. We're rebuilding the basement, the rooms out there. But I have to say, in the wintertime, it's really nice to have the amp running in here because it keeps the room really, really warm. And then over that way is where our satellite station will be. We've got a 9100 over there. And one of our local ham friends, Bill N7QAX, he's done a lot with satellites. So he's gonna come visit us soon and get us up and running so that we know what we're doing. Because it's, we joined AMSAT and we've got all the stuff, but again, like I said earlier, when I was studying, I don't do as good without kind of some of that, more in-person instruction. And I think plus it's always fun to have, and Bill's been one of those people that when we put our towers up, our antennas up, Bill's the guy who was always here to help us out no matter what. So, so his next job is to get us on satellites.
Well, that's actually one of the things that I want to start having a look at soon is satellites. Another local ham here, I think he's watching at the moment. His call sign's VK7ZBX. He's always dabbled a little bit in satellites, and I want to have a bit more of a play around, especially using the 9700 with the software and the Doppler tracking and everything. So maybe we might do some videos on satellites as well. It's they're pretty neat to be able to be able to work. So and it's fun to see it. It's kind of fun too to just watch all of a sudden when you watch the antenna moving and tracking it across the sky, you're like, and you're hearing it when you first hear it happening. And it's, I had never really had much experience with satellites until Sean came out this way for our division convention, which was taking place out near Jackson. And we purposely built our trip to drive across the state. And then we came back through Montana. We made several stops along the way so that he could get out and make QSOs, satellite QSOs. And it was really fun. So he's got this whole setup on his shoulders and a camera bag and the radios and with his Aero antenna. And we're like, okay, we got to try this. This is kind of fun. And your 6 meter station, do you work a lot of 6 meter DX?
I haven't. Dwyane probably has, but certainly in the summertime we try to do as much on 6 meters as possible. And that's a really nice antenna.
2 EMEs on that.
Oh, he said he's gotten 2 EMEs on it so far. So he's been experimenting a lot more with it than I have. Again, because he's up in the middle of the night playing and chasing rocks, and I'm getting my beauty rest. So
I only say that about 6 meters because it's my favorite band. I think of all the bands, it's one band that we it gets a lot. It's very popular in Australia. Actually, we got a lot of people on 6 meters in the summer, and especially with FT8 and everything now, everyone's jumping on FT8 for that. Right. So it's a
what
whole
about
lot of fun.
6 meters makes it your favorite band?
Anything can happen on it. And unfortunately, while I've been licensed since 2004. Okay. And at every solar cycle peak, I haven't been active on 6 meters at the time. So this next solar cycle peak, when we finally get there, I'm going to be active on 6 meters, and hopefully
there you go.
Hopefully we'll be able to work you guys over in the States when the band opens. So
that would be good. Yeah, Australia generally isn't a problem. We have I've made several contacts to Australia, and Dwyane, has gotten a ton too. And so generally it's not a problem. I kind of feel that way about 10 meters. I
don't think anybody in Australia has got a 160 meter antenna.
Oh, he says he hasn't worked with anybody on 160 down in Australia.
We 160 meters is quite popular in Australia. I do know of a few stations that have a lot of space for a very, very big antenna. I know of one in particular who is in the state of New South Wales who has, I think it's a Beveridge antenna. He's got a long 160 meter antenna. But you mentioned 10 meters. That's probably my second favorite band.
Yeah,
it's good fun. 10 meters.
It is fun. And actually there was a 10 meter contest that I think I had my best run rate. Of course, the exchange was really short, but I did something like 225 QSOs in an hour. I mean, it was a crazy busy time, but 10 meters can be a lot of fun, and it can also be a lot frustrating, but so can 6 meters as well, because, you're talking and you hear these stations and poof, they're gone. You're like, it's so frustrating.
What's even more frustrating is 2 meters when you're waiting for them to and
yeah.
then they disappear. But 10 meters. What's your favorite HF band, the one that you get on the most?
Probably 20, because honestly, it's easiest.
Yep.
You don't have to fight so hard to hear people and make the contacts. And so, you have such a wide area, and I've become pretty familiar with what happens in different parts of the band. So I can usually find a spot like, say 14248 is usually a good kind of place to go call CQ, because it's certain times of the day it seems to be a little bit quieter. And I like 40 sometimes, but 40 I get frustrated with kind of easily because it gets really noisy and harder to pull people out. And I think it's just my ears are getting older and I lose my patience. I'm like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, and
whereas I used to be like, all right, I'll keep listening and trying, and now I'm like, I'll try it later.
being as remote as you said that you are there, you'd have quite a low noise level on the HF bands, though. That'd help certainly.
Yeah, generally we do. We do have an issue in our little neighborhood that we live in. There's with the power company, there's a noisy transformer out this way. So whenever we point east, we always have a bit of a challenge. And I know when Dwyane's been like trying an EME, he has absolutely no luck pointing east, but pointing west is not a problem. But fortunately, the power company is coming in and redoing all of the power poles here in the neighborhood. So pretty soon that should eliminate that. But yeah, in general, the noise level in Wyoming is pretty close to non-existent. It's really, really nice.
Yeah.
Oh, Ian says he's gonna be looking for me at 14248 tomorrow. Ian, I thought you were gonna go to bed. It's like 4 a.m. over there in the UK.
He's stayed up. He's decided to dedicated. That's for sure.
I guess so.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Katie, for the shack tour and for the interview today. It's been a real pleasure and good to get to know you, and also Dwyane there as well. How's the DX been going for him in the background? Has he worked?
Have you gotten any DX over there? He's listening to the show. Let's see.
Morocco, Italy,
Germany, France,
Venezuela.
and Venezuela.
And on 20 meters.
Oh no, he was on 40 tonight.
On 40 meters. Yep.
Yeah, the
FT8.
sun's about gone, so 20 is useless here right now.
Yep.
But, so yeah, see, he's sitting there working away.
That's good.
Well, I want to say thank you so much. It's it was great to meet you last week on Josh's show celebrating his 100,000 subscribers, and really appreciate the invitation to join you on your show. And it's been a lot of fun. And thanks for everybody who's been watching. And
yeah, I think we got up to about 80 people were watching at one point.
Great.
So that was good. And thanks for everyone on the live stream for joining in as well.
Absolutely.
But I've got a little bit more to go to, Josh. I've got another 98,000 subscribers to go. So
right.
I just passed 2,500 in the week. So
awesome.
So
I bet you got a bunch from people watching last week. So that was probably good.
Yeah, and surprisingly, most of them are from the United States. So,
there you go.
Yeah. So, no, thanks again, Katie, and
you're welcome.
I'm sure we'll do it again soon. And we look forward to catching up again. And once again, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks. And 73, everybody.
7-3.